I'd like to start out by introducing our panelists. First, I have sitting next to me Simon Califf. Simon, could you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've been in the Valley for about, 17 years now. 4 startups, 2 big companies, 4 acquisitions, and 2 where I was acquired.
And next would be Rory O'Driscoll.
Yeah.
Yeah?
That would be me, yeah.
Could you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. I've been in the Valley since about 1991. My background is I was born in Ireland, and after I graduated from college, just like maybe some of you guys are thinking of doing, I set up my own business in the United Kingdom, which I ran for 4 years, and proved to my satisfaction that I was at best a mediocre manager, and that perfectly competitive, highly competitive industries do not need a marginal entrant. So having proven that to my satisfaction, I moved over to the United States and started working in venture capital in '93, and I've been doing that ever since.
Rory and I share a board of directors that we're on. I should mention that Simon and I were actually involved in a company together as well. We were kind of doing the math here. It was 11 years ago that we were involved. He was a founder and I was a board member. Bruce?
So I'm Bruce Kozad, GSB 91. Got my first job out of business school sitting, I think, in this classroom when the CEO came to visit the class, and I asked him for a job after class. That was my entrance into the pharmaceutical world, where I spent 10 years with Alza Corporation until that company was acquired by Johnson & Johnson in 2001. And then in 2003, I co-founded with 2 of my former executive management team members from Alza, a company called Jazz Pharmaceuticals based here in Palo Alto. And we are in startup mode year 3, growing last year from 40 to 150 people and thinking a lot about hiring, motivating, and not yet firing. So that's where we are.
So those of you who are looking for jobs. Bruce, by the way, was a Ford Scholar when he was at GSB. And even more notorious, he married one of his classmates who is Sharon Hoffman, now the Associate Dean. See, they're impressed.
Blew your cover, mate.
Hap, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Hap Klopp, and I went to the GSB a long time ago, and unlike Bruce, nobody wanted to hire me, so I started my own firm called the North Face, ran it for 20 years, sold that, and then since that time I've bought and sold a few companies, gotten on a lot of boards. More I got on than I got off, sadly, but learned a lot from it and certainly have enjoyed the prospect and seen ups and downs in business, which include all sides of motivation, hiring, and firing.
Thank you. So what we're going to do, I believe we have an hour for this session. We're going to do 40 minutes of a moderated panel, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. So please hold your questions until that time. We'll have 20 minutes for that. And I'd like to start out in the area of hiring. And first question would be, what are your best sources and methods of finding new people? Maybe let's start with you.
Sure. It's the network. Silicon Valley is a small place. We're all based here, so you know a lot of people who know a lot of people. So that's how you start.
I think that's how you start, but a lot depends on the position. The reality is if you've been in marketing all your life and you look for a director of marketing, you probably know what you're looking for. I'm on the board of a lot of different companies as a venture investor. When we're looking for a CEO, if it's an area where it's our first investment in, we're not going to have 10 people. And in that case, the recruiting process is what you have to do. There's no substitute for it. Because you might know in your whole life 100,000 people. You're going to pay them to make 500 phone calls in the space of the next 3 weeks. So, again, I would say it varies very much by what you're trying to achieve and what your realistic network is.
What kind of hit ratio do you get with recruiters?
Hit ratio in terms of getting a guy, high. Hit rate in terms of getting a good guy. I think it'll segue to the next question on you got to do quality control.
Yeah. Bruce?
Yeah, I'd combine the two and say even when I'm working through recruiters, I'm networking. And it's how well I know the recruiters, how well the recruiters know me, how much they know what my company's trying to accomplish, what the position is, so they can do as much of that screening as possible. You know, I'm a big believer in thinking through people's motivation. Remember, recruiters are going to get paid if they fill the position with anyone. So part of your job is to build enough of a personal relationship with that recruiter and make them interested in your business over a long period of time so that they're not thinking about putting anyone in that job to get paid. They're thinking about doing a good job for you so they'll get business over the next 20 years.
Hap?
Well, I agree with what they're saying. I think the stage of business makes a big difference. If you're starting off and you're two people, you may not attract a whole lot of headhunters who want to deal with you. And if you're larger, they may not bring you the people you want. I would combine, and I have in many cases combined networking along with a recruiter and never give an exclusive to a recruiter to say that you've got the job if that's the case. Now, if you're running a $10 billion business, probably give them an exclusive and they'll come up with somebody. But combine the two. The best thing is compare and contrast once you see what the quality is, and then have some other people interview alongside, not just yourself, people who have different perspectives, like Rory was saying, because if you're a marketing person, you probably don't understand the technical world, and the person that you will be attracted to is probably not the best person for the job.
A couple of recruiter questions. Do you do, and for anybody, do you do carve-outs with recruiters? Number one, and we can define that in a second. And the other one is, what do you do when the recruiter has kind of finished his list of usual suspects? You're 3.5 months into the search and nothing much is going on.
Sure.
That's never happened to any of you.
It has.
Well, glad. I mean, I think first on the carve-outs, which means where you exclude some people from the recruiting fee because you already know them. I have a clear process on that. Yes, I'll do carve-outs, but I'll pay them based on when I make the decision. In other words, if a recruiter's getting paid 30, 60, and 90 days, 1/3 of the fee, and I have a carve-out list of 5 people, and for some reason I don't make a decision to hire from that 5 people until after 90 days, the recruiter has made the phone calls, they get paid for the work. So I'm a big believer in, if they do the work, they get paid, even if the person's on the carve-out list. But if on the 29th day you hire one of your 5 carve-out, you give them the first third and move on.
Yeah, I'll answer the second question.
Yeah.
I think you'd know within the first 30 days the quality of the search based on who they're sourcing. Even if you haven't spoken to the candidates, you get an idea that they're going to the right place without you telling them where to go. And I'll answer another one. A lot of time you end up hiring an awesome recruiting firm, and you end up with a guy that you knew. I'm like, damn, why didn't I call this guy first and save myself $90K? A lot of time that happens.
And the experience I've had is that it's the individual in the recruiting firm that makes a difference. The firm's name doesn't mean a whole lot. It's the network, the contacts that people have. I've certainly seen some big companies that couldn't find anybody, and some individuals who could find more candidates than you possibly bring in. So I would do a little researching on the background of the people. I, too, have done carve-outs, and the carve-outs I've done generally a little different, where I bring some people in, and they're bringing some in, and they can't get a fee on the ones I bring in. Usually what I've done, and it's all negotiable, but I've usually negotiated that they would get a fee, a half or a third, because other than that, they say, well, why? All you're trying to do is benchmark, so why should we go out and really do the best research we can get?
Yeah, just to add a tip of my own. When I have a recruiting firm in process for a high-level position, I like to invite them to every board meeting. And by inviting them to every board meeting, we have an impending event, and usually the week before the board meeting, they get a lot of work done.
Yeah,
right. How about the night before? Yeah.
I do that with bankers too. Work out a deal. Get them to every board meeting. They know they got to show up. They know they don't want to look stupid, so they do some work before they get there. Okay. What kind of selection process do you use in your hiring? How do you go about Everybody's looking at you, Bruce. So.
Well, I don't know why.
Because you're married to Sharon.
Yeah, yes. That's a different kind of selection process. So I think that having the technical experts do the basic screening to say, is this person capable of doing the job, is a pretty critical piece of the puzzle. And I don't claim that for the people we've hired at my company, I don't claim that I can do that for most of them. However, once people are through that screen, in our case, everybody we hire at the company, literally everybody, and we're still small enough to do that at this point, meets with one of the founders of the company to match for culture. And that's critical to us. We're still building the culture of the company. We think it's a competitive advantage. And we know every person we hire can add to or detract from the culture. And so We spend a lot of time talking about environments they've been successful in or not been successful in, what they've liked and not liked about cultures they've been in. We spend a lot of time talking about what the company is trying to accomplish, and I'm looking for a match at that level, as well as are they capable of doing the job.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we put a lot of emphasis on the background check, not just the references they give you. I mean, everything the person has done is available on the net. You Google them, you know where they worked, who they know, and you ask those people, and you understand how they do, what's their teamwork like, what they've done in the past, and you make the decisions based on that.
Do you guys engage private firms to do background checks, and do you do testing?
Yeah, I'll take that. I mean, yes, absolutely. These days, especially a deal overseas, you do a background check. It's almost non-negotiable because the penalties. That's right. Glad to see the ringtone business is booming. We have an investment. You should all download and buy more ringtones. But the penalties for getting involved in a company where a senior member of that team has any kind of difficult connections, foreign corrupt practices, or terrorism related. There's a long list of folks who just can't be involved. And if you don't check and it blows up in your face, it's a fatal error. There is no fix. So absolutely, there are gentlemen out there, generally ex-FBI or CIA guys, who, for a service, will tell you everything, right down to, I did one recently where I got information on a 1977 traffic ticket. We did the deal.
Yeah, one other thing I would say is be careful to recognize every time you're adding a key person to your organization, you should go through this process. And one of the mistakes I've seen is that when companies do acquisitions and they acquire people who may currently be part of the management team or could move up to be part of the management team, they don't think of that as hiring. They skip background checks, and that can be devastating to your business. We've seen some examples of that in the Valley in the last 5 years. So if you're acquiring a company, do background checks on the key people.
Do you have something?
Well, I certainly echo what Bruce is saying, that there's a time and place, however. If you're a small company, you may not be able to do that. I do references as well on key companies, but when you're bringing somebody in, you're starting a firm, you may not be able to do that. And so if you can't, then you need to test people on the outside. And frankly, you don't have to go very far outside the circle before you start getting a good word. It's really hard, by the way, to get any reference from any other company about any individual, so you can't rely on that at all because there's so many legal pitfalls associated with it. So, the person could basically be the worst criminal in the world, a terrorist or something, and they would give him a modestly good thing. No, we probably wouldn't hire him again, but while he was here, he was a great employee. Effective, right, yes.
Yeah.
And so and I've never seen a bad resume. The CVs all look pretty good, so to rely on that, I use the inverse ratio. The thicker the resume, the less chance I'm going to take that person. It means they're trying too hard.
Yeah, I have a thing that I call a trusted reference, which is someone you know. Rory and I have been on the board. If I was going to hire someone, that he knew I'd call him, and he.
Yep.
I was going to say he'd probably tell me the truth, but then I thought better of that.
Well, I think it's actually a great point, because Bruce said something earlier, examine people's motivations, right? In every reference call, to a greater or lesser extent, everyone's mentally thinking, do I value the guy asking me more than I value the guy I'm being referenced on? Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe that, you're a fool, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give... So that's the first comment. And people do that. So the best reference you can have is from someone that you have a trusted relationship with, where he's just not going to stick it to you, right? And I'm not going to stick it to Mark because he'll get on my case for the next 1,000 years. Life's too short. And then the second thing I find is senior people won't outright lie. HR people will just say, oh, he worked from X to Y. Senior people, if you listen very carefully, will tell you the truth. And one of the things we say in our shop is everything you learn in due diligence is true, but magnified. And I look back when I started in this business, I got nuanced references from senior people, and I was too junior to understand what they were saying. And 10 years later, I go back and go, oh, that was the secret Silicon Valley code for don't touch this guy with a 10-foot pole, you fool. So listen carefully. For example, Mark, I doubt Mark is going to outright lie to anyone. You'll judge and nuance your position. So pay careful attention.
Good. So I wanted to just kind of move on the hiring area to another question. This is an entrepreneurial conference, and I wanted to ask, for those of you who've had experience hiring both in large and small, What are the differences? Do you look for different character traits in hiring into an entrepreneurial company than you look at a larger company? And how do you identify them?
Sure. Smaller companies, it's all about personalities and cultural fit. You're a family that's kind of growing slowly. Sometimes it grows fast. Sometimes it shrinks fast as well. In larger companies, you have to put a more rigorous process. That you have to go to, department by department, understand their needs, and you focus over the right time and the right place more than you focus on the character fit.
I would also say in a young company, you need proven performers. You don't have time to flail around for a couple of years until you get it right. So bringing in the right people who really know what they're doing, I think, is essential. Bigger company, hiring raw talent, I think, is great, and I'm a big fan of that. But in the startup phase, it's a little harder to do that. If you don't think the person can come in and do the job tomorrow, they're probably not the right person.
So, yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting to note that those two opinions are in direct conflict. And I really thought, when we were thinking about the questions, because you're exactly right. When you've only got 5 people, you can't have, if you add an incompetent 6th person, you've taken the effectiveness down 16% out of the box, let alone second-order effects. So that would argue for a strong bias in early stage for functional skill. Take your point, and it argues for compatibility, cultural stuff.
I didn't say incompatible. So.
No, I hear you. But you end up,
And I
you
didn't
end
say
up in
inexperience.
Yeah, so you want both. Now, when you get the candidate list of 3 and you have to make a choice, what do? You got,
You keep looking until you find both.
hard-nosed.
I mean, you do. You have to.
It's a lot more important when you begin. If you don't have that, your whole foundation is wrong. Later on, I mean, you can have a cultural misfit, and it's okay. You can get by. But at the beginning, I mean, a lot of companies just blow up at that stage. Can't stand it. I hate them. Not going to work with them, and they fight internally as opposed to fighting the competitor outside. And the world's pretty rugged out there.
So do the candidates need a greater tolerance for uncertainty, ambiguity?
Are you talking in the hiring process?
No, in the living process.
I think we can move to absolutely and not.
So this kind of segues nicely into the next question I had, which is any spots for MBAs in these startup companies? Because we have a lot of them here, and some of them are looking for jobs.
I'd say yes. I come from a different place than they do. I'm certainly not in the Valley, and being in the backpacking and outdoor business, there's a lot of knowledge that when I was in there that doesn't come with the MBA, but needs the MBA training. And if they're a specialist and honed in on a certain area, the background that they have, coupled with that refinement, is extremely good, because the business. I mean, it was amazing. I was just at the outdoor show, and I probably met more MBAs, more science degree majors, PhDs or whatever, than I've met at any technology conference I've ever been in. It's kind of a stage of the industry as people are coming in right now and trying to refine these companies. So, I think there's an opportunity, and and if it's like me and nobody fits, then start your own company.
Yeah, I work with a lot of Stanford MBAs, so definitely. But the degree is generally not the deciding factor, right? It's something they happen to have. It means the admissions office here chose fabulous people. That's a big piece of it right there. It's what they did with their time here. It's not that they got a degree. What did you do? If you were here for 2 years, what did you do when you were here? What did you get out of it? What are your motivations? But the degree itself is not nearly enough.
Are you saying that the MBA is a great plus if they already have the domain expertise, either technically or in sales or in whatever it is? Or if they come in as a generalist and they come out as a generalist, is there a place for them? Is they all, kind of the opposite of that?
They need to be able to add something.
Specific value.
It doesn't mean they've always done exactly the same job. It doesn't even mean they've always been in the same industry. But there has to be a bridge between their experience and what we need that's going to help them be successful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if we were looking for a junior person in a venture capital organization, I think it'd be a strong attraction to have an MBA, because you have a set of functional skills around finance that you've just learned. But without the real skills, undergraduate engineering degree, industry experience of some sort, it's just not enough. So it's a set of skills and a branding event.
Okay, so to summarize, you have to be an engineer to get into a tech company, or you have to go to HAP because he hires anybody who's interested in the outdoors.
Right, yeah.
Or you got to start your own company.
Yeah. You've got to climb high mountains.
One way or the other.
Good.
Or you've got to impress somebody we know very well. That's the other.
Okay, let me move to the subject of you've hired these great people because you've got these great process, great selection, sources and things like that. You've done phenomenal reference checking, and you've got great people in the company. And the question is, how do you keep these guys motivated? And the first question that I wanted to talk to is somewhat of a technical question. The landscape for stock options has changed in the last probably 12 to 24 months quite substantially. Stock option accounting, 409A. How important is stock options in startup companies? How important, what's your philosophy about how wide or narrow is the distribution? And how do you see these evolving regulations, having impact, if any, on our entrepreneurial industry?
Sure. I can start with that. It's been a challenge the past 3 years. I mean, and if you add the Section 409, which prices the stock almost what you can get it in the market. If you go and buy that equity, it's tough. Why are you evaluating stock or sweat equity the same way you'd value dollar-based equity? So you cannot justify to an employee that you're almost getting it at the same price. That's number one. Number two, the IPO market, which is where folks hope to be in, is closed, and you only have 6 or 7 or even 20 companies that are doing the acquisitions, and that doesn't create a huge wealth factor. So it is a big challenge. So you have to find other mechanism to motivate employees, not just stock options. So it's been a big challenge, and until the IPO market opens up, it's going to remain a challenge.
So I think it's a big challenge. I'll say it depends on the culture of the company you're trying to create, what kinds of people you're going to have inside your company, what kinds of jobs they're going to be doing. In our case, we give options to everybody that joins the company. We don't give the same number to everybody that joins the company, but there's a lot of symbolic value, and we're all in this together. There aren't two classes of citizens here in our company. The fact that they're now expensed, they were never free, gang. We can talk about how you account for it, but there is a cost. We all recognize that. We account for it differently, but they should be used wisely like any other tool you have as a manager that costs the company something. I just think it means you need to be more thoughtful about it, but I still believe in a fairly widespread option program.
Yeah, I mean, I concur, especially the last comment. It's unbelievable that Silicon Valley took the intellectually inconsistent position that they weren't an expense and had the guts to sustain that for 15 years. You got to love what people will do for money. Any accounting major could have told you it is an expense, it should be expense, it can be valued, it can be priced. If it can't be priced, you can sell them and you'll know. The market will give you a price. So it should be expense, that's fine. The real impact of all this is, I still believe in that everyone should get some, but stock options are about incenting people in the company to achieve an outcome that you as a board member and as an investor want. I believe what you do is you end up putting more weight on the top 5 or 6 people. They end up getting more options, so you're really looking at how much money they can make, even with the higher exercise price, if they drive the behavior you want. Further down the ranks, you're probably not as plentiful as you used to be. You still give some, but the symbolic value of even 100 shares for the receptionist is real, but it's not 1,000 anymore. So in the end, I do believe they motivate behavior at the top. I believe you put up with the BS of 409A and expense them and just use it to drive key behavior.
Pat?
Well, yeah, I would echo everything there. I'm a firm believer that you should give them, but I've seen great companies, W.L. Gore Company is an example, that give absolutely no ownership to people and yet have passionate buy-in from everybody there. I think the key is to actually have a business culture vision that draws people in, not here's a lot of options, so come to work for me because it's better. And it should almost be as if the options are the last thing you discuss. Anybody that comes to me and said, well, what sort of option program do you have before we really talk about the company isn't the candidate I want. And I totally believe
So you're not in Silicon Valley, are you?
No, I'm not. But, and I agree with the gradation. And, I think the fact that it costs money is an irrelevant factor. Either you're going to give it to people or you're not. how much you're going to give can be determined. I mean, okay, cut down how much you give if it costs too much. That to me is a smokescreen for really not wanting to spend the money and saying, oh, now we have a reason we're not going to do it.
So if you look at the distribution of options in the conversation we just talked about here, if salaries in a small company, maybe the lowest salary to the highest salary might be something less than 10 to 1. And if options, the range might be 1,000 to 1 or even more than that. You comfortable with that? You all comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Do you believe that that's the case, by the way?
Yes.
It might definitely. I'm just doing the math.
It's 2 orders of magnitude.
Yeah,
It's 2 orders of magnitude, not 3. Yeah, I mean, look, CEO gets ballpark mid-stage company 5%, a VP gets 1%, a director gets 0.5. So you're at 10 to 1, 2 levels at director,
Correct.
right? And then you go 10 to 1 again. You're right, for individual contributors, probably 100 to 1, and for random receptionists, whatever, it could be more. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Clearly, the rest of corporate America is. Yeah. I mean, the average CEO is 430 times average pay.
Is there a cultural downside to that, or is it just okay?
It's accepted.
It's accepted. Okay.
Well, there's a flip side of it. A lot of people don't really give a damn at the lower end.
Yeah.
They say, the amount you're giving me, it really doesn't do it, but I appreciate being part of the loop. The fact that you think that I'm there. And they don't set up their life financial plan based around those options.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to talk to individual contributors in the last 5 years and how their my brother works in a company. 6 years ago, he used to talk about the stock options. 3 years ago, they were talking about the 401k.
Yeah.
That was a very telling change. And I think it's universal at the individual contributor level.
Mm-hmm.
So can I ask a question of the rest of the panel?
No. Yes, you can.
That was one. Here's another.
Yes, and you did.
Do we have to answer?
Can you give a senior person too many options?
Well,
Or
I
should you, or
think
can
think
you?
you can.
Is there a
aren't you
risk?
trying to
Is there
get
a risk?
you're trying to get a certain performance by doing it? If you give twice the number that's required to accomplish it, you've really taken money away from other people, shareholders and whatever. So I don't believe in being terribly penurious or trying to screw somebody, but I mean, why just dump a whole bunch on somebody and so that they have this fantastic
That
return?
segues nicely into the next topic. We're not quite there, but it talks about firing people. And certainly if you have too many options, that's one of the ways you can fix that problem. Right? You're not vested.
Good point, Mark.
But yeah.
I want to try to cover a little bit more ground over here. So what are the, we kind of talked about the stock, and we certainly know about the cash component. What are the non-monetary motivators in young companies? How important are they? What do you, as leaders in companies, do about these non-monetary motivators? Who wants to take
So
it?
culture of the company is hugely important. It's got to be a place where people want to spend time, feel valued, feel connected to what the company is trying to accomplish, feel they make a difference. I think that is
How do you go about creating
hugely
that?
important.
How do you create that?
You think about it from day one. You think about why you're setting a company, the kinds of people you're going to hire, how they're going to work together, what space they're going to be in, how they're going to be compensated, how you communicate with them, how you bring them into the company and enculturate them. I mean, you just, it doesn't happen by accident. You think about it from day one. But I think that is hugely motivational and can make a company successful and can sustain it through very hard times if people feel great about the environment and want to be part of the organization.
Somebody once told me the way to motivate people is hire motivated people, and I think that's really true. To try and spend all your energy motivating somebody who isn't lit up is just isn't going to happen. And then I think, in addition to all the good things that Bruce mentioned, I think you have to really have a vision for the company that people can buy off in. You have to have a larger objective rather than just making money, because every single day trying to make money, and the accounting conventions allow a lot of flexibility with respect to that, and we all know it. They go, oh, we didn't really, or we could have. There has to be something. People are looking for three things when they come in for the job. First one is security of some degree. The second one is that they want respect for what they're doing, and the third one is opportunity. Present all of those, do it in an ethical way. If you have an environment which is toxic, you're going to lose people, irrespective of options and salaries and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Set incremental objectives and celebrate wins. It's key. It's good to have a vision, but a lot of people lose patience. As long as you celebrate like a customer win or software release or something, then you give them a lot of things to enjoy. And it's kind of happiness spreads. So if you motivate a person, they're going to motivate the person underneath them or the one sitting in the cubicle next to them. So celebrating incremental objectives would be good.
In the Silicon Valley area, there tends to be, in a young company, management and engineers. And the engineers say, like, we're building the product and they're getting all the stock. And management says, "Oh, these guys are such, prima donnas. What am I going to do to, get them to work and deliver on time?" What do you do with that situation? Have you ever seen that situation? Does that resonate with you at all? You have not seen that? Okay. No.
Not really.
Okay.
I think that if you see it a lot, there's a problem, because I think depending on, if the company is just an engineering project, you shouldn't have a bunch of empty suits walking around there bitching and moaning about a product that's not shipped. I think one of the things, this whole culture discussion has been actually good, because sometimes when people talk about culture, it's like, let's all do sports together or something weird and extraneous to the problem at hand, and I have no sympathy for that, right? Obvious reason. Culture is about a culture and a passion around the objective. And then to nuance to your question, it's around the objective at the time. When the company is fundamentally an engineering company with some small amount of customer input, everyone should be passionate about engineering, right? And when the company is doing $100 million in revenue, everyone should be passionate about winning and set of financial metrics around growing the business. And if you have that, then you don't get this kind of dissonance problem.
Good. Yeah. Hap, you have any thoughts on it? Or?
I think he's right on.
Okay, good. Okay, let's go to, we've got lots more questions in each of these areas, but let's go to firing. So let me ask you first about the basics here. How do you go about firing somebody? What are your practical tips about firing? I assume you've all had the duty of doing that at some point in time. So how do you go about doing that? And then later on, I'd like to as you're thinking about it, think about what do you do when it's a friend? So there's two things that you run into.
So humanely and honestly, I would say, are the keys. And obviously there are lots of reasons you might fire someone, and the cases are very different, right? There's unethical behavior. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that one. There's a misfit, right? Somebody's incapable of doing the job, is in the wrong job. Your needs have changed, but there's a misfit. And then there's the business requires it. And I think they're all somewhat different, but you need to be honest about the reason. And if the reason is essentially the company's fault, and I'd argue all these may be the company's fault, but if the reason is the company has to get smaller, then I think you want to be honest with people about that. This is not an indictment of your performance, of your employability, of your value. We hate to do this. We are going to do everything we can to make sure you end up in a great place. If it's a misfit, I think you need to be just as honest. This isn't working out. It's not working out for us, and frankly, it's not working out for you. You're not going to have a good future in this organization from where you are now. We're going to end this employment relationship, and again, we'd love to help you find a better fit. But I think the key is you don't. It's an inherently stressful, horribly stressful situation for the person being let go, and you want to do everything you can to make sure they understand this is business. This is not your whole life. This is one moment, and you're going to get through it. This isn't an indictment of you as an individual.
I had lots of comments, but I'd also, a most tactical comment of all is, in the first or second sentence of the discussion, these people who meander around, this is hard for me, let's talk about the weather, how's your job going, and then 10 minutes later whack you. That is so humiliating for the other person. It's unacceptable. In the first sentence, and in clear, declarative English that can be understood by a person who, remember, stops hearing after around the going to have to ask you to, then it just, big noise comes in their head and they hear very little after that. So more than anything, I've got lots of nuanced comments, but that I think is most important. I have seen people come out of what was meant to be a firing interview and not know they were fired.
Well, you should fire their boss.
Well, exactly. Watching a venture capitalist sack his secretary is one of the special joys of life. Just so bad. They can do a CEO, but their secretary, ooh.
Yeah, I'd say in a startup, you're always firing a friend, because that's the person you're spending 12 hours a day with. That's friendship, even if you hate them. So,
Go, Simon.
So, but there's a process with the individual, and then there's a process with the remainder of the employees, which is very key, which is when you let go of a person, that's a complete divorce. I definitely don't recommend bringing them back to a company lunch. That's the most insulting. But you have to also make sure that the remainders of the employee understand that it was not retaliation. It was not just poor performance. It was just a misfit. And giving them the guarantees that they're not next. It's just a question of time. Because that's when the cycle, the bad cycle begins.
Yeah, I'm fond of saying on this subject that how you fire someone is as much for the people who stay as for the people who go.
Absolutely.
It defines who you are as a company.
Yeah.
It defines your character. It defines your culture.
And the way you do it.
And it's viewed very, very carefully by the other people. Everybody looks very, very meticulously at what was said and how it was said. It really is a way to send the message to other people that you're humane and you treat people with dignity and care.
Right. These people are going to go out and talk to other people, right? And they become a reflection on your corporate culture and how you treat people as much as the people that stay.
So you do this act over dinner, or how do you do this?
No.
You don't do it over dinner?
No.
Okay. Where would you do it over? Or when, where, how, when, what would be the...
Well, everybody talks about doing it on Friday so that there's no impact and things. You always praise in public and criticize in private. So what you want to do is make sure that somebody has a graceful exit. I mean, first of all, in the case of the misfit, I've never seen anybody who was fired as a misfit that didn't know it.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a little bit of relief. I mean, so the second thing is if you say, okay, now we're going to have somebody escort you from the building past all of your coworkers, you've probably created a little dissonance there that's going to come back to haunt you. And then that happens frequently. And it's very demeaning. So the idea is to try to find a place that is appropriate, usually your office, because that's where the authority comes from and the role is there, and then to make sure that it's a time when not a whole lot of people are around so that they don't have to go through that. So if you can ask somebody to stay after work and say, we want to meet, or at a time which is more appropriate where they don't have to be embarrassed, is good, because, Mark's point is there. You fire one person, you impact everybody.
Yeah, I just thought I'd add a little story. The first time I ever fired someone, I called this guy up. It was clear that he should be fired, and I called this guy up and said, "Show up in my office on Friday morning." He was an out-of-town employee, and Thursday night, I did not sleep a wink. I was just really, really stressed out and just upset, and how do you do this to another person and everything like that. And I got in on Friday morning, and there was a message waiting for me when I got there. It says, "Can't make it. See you Monday morning." So.
I'll give you a quick story from our days at Alza when we had to do a layoff. And one of the debates we had was how you treat people and do you escort them from the building and do you lock them out of the computer networks to avoid vandalism or whatever. And, needless to say, we were a good company, so we made the right call, which is, we trusted all these people yesterday. Why aren't we trusting them today? So we didn't do any of those things. And what we came in the next morning to find a slew of emails that had gone out from the people we had fired, telling the rest of the company what a great place it is, how much they valued their time there, and how they were still supporters of the organization. That's what they did on the email system when we left them access, because they were treated well.
Yeah, I concur. I think you have to be decisive in decision making, but I found in the execution, if you operate on the assumption that most of the time most people are reasonably decent, you actually won't go wrong a lot, and when you do, that's okay. It's an acceptable cost. 90% of the time you get that reaction, and 1 in 10 times you get the jerk reaction. And let me tell you, the good thing about that is you kind of go, ooh, I'm really glad I fired him. In fact, could we do it again? So absolutely, Aaron, most people, even in a firing situation, will, especially the first time you do it, you're building up this thing. Will he, will it be physical? Right. That has happened to me on one occasion. Will he go nonlinear? Will he wreck the thing? Will he thrash our reputation? And in general, people don't, especially if you're decisive and have one mistake I've run over them, have the follow-up paperwork ready. If there's a deal for the guy, if there's some economics, some severance, have it ready. The longer you take to resolve a firing situation, both before you've told them and especially after you've told them while you're negotiating the deal, the sourer it gets.
Nobody said it, but you should also have a lawyer. because there's technical ways that you have to go through and tests that you have to meet, and it's a little arcane. It's not quite as straightforward as, okay, it's time to get rid of them. So go to a reputable firm and maybe don't follow everything they do, but listen to them before you do what you do.
Good. We're kind of at the point, we've been here 40, we've got 20 to go, so I'd like to take some questions. Yes?
I have a question with respect to promoting within versus hiring people from outside, and how you strike a balance of that, and you know, how do you alleviate maybe some fears that if people have been there very early on, you know, and they get hired over, you know, what's the tension that might create?
So the question is, how do you, what's the wisdom of promoting within versus hiring from the outside, with particular emphasis on the people who've been there a long time? I'm repeating the questions for the recording here.
So, you know, it's nice to say you'll always promote from within, and that creates a lot of harmony. There will be times when that's not the right answer, and the challenge, as I look at it, is I need to bring in somebody who's so good that the person who got passed over will say, I support this, this is the right thing for the company. And that often means, although it's awkward, making the person who's going to get passed over part of the recruiting process and part of the interviewing process. And if you're comfortable with it, and I'm not saying everyone would be comfortable with it, essentially give them a veto right. I am going to go out and look. I'm going to have you be part of the interview process. If you don't think this person will bring more to the organization than we currently have, tell me and we won't hire them. But I think you need to involve them in the process.
Yeah.
These companies that we at least try and invest in, they grow extremely fast. They double every year, sometimes they treble, right? More so than most industries. There's just a huge amount of change every quarter and every year, right? What's great about Silicon Valley, and I think one of the cultural things about it, is there is an acceptance of that. And the issue you're raising is entirely normal. And if you're just direct and honest about it and say, you know, we've gone from 0 to 10, you were part of that, we got to go from 10 to 100. And it'll feel a lot safer to me as the CEO if we have someone in there who's seen that part of it. You can learn from them, you benefit, and the next time you get to do it. There's a lot more willingness, I find, here to accept that, and there's an understanding of how the game is played, that even in high-growth companies outside Silicon Valley, it can be a lot harder to get across to people. And that's just interesting for me to see the differences in culture around this issue that you get.
Yeah, I would, just comment that the idea of only promoting from within actually builds a very inbred company. And if you go to the science of genetics, it'll tell you that it weakens the species. And I think it really does. I think it's true for companies as well.
But there are also a number of companies that just won't take anybody in from the outside. Nike is a classic example of the business we know. They just did a little change over there. But everybody who comes in from elsewhere who doesn't fit into that culture is rejected by it. Yeah. And yet it's a very good company and highly successful. So I don't think that there's one formula for it. But what I tell people is, as Bruce was saying, if it isn't really overwhelming that the person should come in, then you don't do it. Because it's the old grass is greener theory. Somebody comes in, you don't know their weakness. Right. But you do know the people's weakness you've worked with day in and day out. And, you know, if they're fitting in, there's a cultural fit and some of those others, that may not happen with the outside people. So it's got to be a remarkable need. But, I mean, in some cases where you're saying, okay, we're going to a new level of technology or something, and, you know, we need a head of technology, and we don't have anybody here. We have everybody who's engineers, but nobody's
I think that was a fair point. You should have a bias to try your guy, right, or person, right? Mm-hmm. Because venture capital, I think, often there's such a lot of passion in a founder team, right? And, you know, good business is good, good management execution is good, but passion will get you a long way provided you also have a good product. And if you dilute that too quickly or too thinly, much more like, in other words, if you get rid of all the founder passion too early, you lose nothing. I find the best deals are where they keep that founder passion and then mix in, exactly what you said, mix in the outside gene. Because just, in my opinion, an equally weak species is the all-outside species, where there's everyone there. Where you go around the room and everyone there has 1% only. They're all professional managers, and there's no one in that company who lives and breathes that company and knows why he started it. That's a weak company too.
Yeah, I agree with Bruce. Make the person that wants the job part of the interview process, and make sure that he or she is the person who selects the boss. because then they'll know that they're going to learn from that person. It's a tough thing, and a lot of people and the founders, they're not going to agree. Hey, I'm going to be the CEO forever, and it is a challenge.
Rarely happens.
No comment.
Yes, sir.
We talked about the importance of hiring, which probably prevents a lot of the firing problems too. And how important it is when you're small to hire the right cultural fit, the proven performers and all that. So let's say you're looking for a while, you don't find the right match. Do you try to go long here, or do you settle for less? I mean, when do you throw in the towel and say, okay, I can't find the right match?
So the question is, it takes a long time to hire people. When do you compromise on perfecting it relative to your own standards? I'm just paraphrasing a little bit. That's okay.
The first thing I do is look in the mirror.
Yep.
You know, if you can't do it, you know, maybe you're the problem. And that's a case to look at. I would never compromise in getting the right person. If you think somebody's second, I mean, you've just set the tone for your entire business. And if you're not out to win, then you shouldn't be in the game. And no matter how different the fields may be, compete or not, and compete requires having the best. But if you can't find them and you're doing a legitimate search over some time, there's another factor in there.
The other thing I would say is, and this is probably different from 20 or 30 years ago, there is such an unbelievable network of people out there who consult outsourcing options that there are lots of ways to get things done before you've hired one person to fill a job full time. And so that buys you time. It just buys you flexibility to find the right person.
Yeah, I'll say if you cannot sell your company and yourself to somebody you're going to pay, you have no chance in hell you're going to sell your solution to somebody who's going to pay you. So the people are there. You just have to do an aggressive hunt and close. You got to close them. You can't. Once you find your candidate, don't let them go. Don't let their employer, give them more option, convince them, and don't let anyone else talk to them. Just hunt.
Yeah, because I think something Hab said at the start is very true. If you can't get it done after a good search and you've met lots of people, look in the mirror. And it's not just about what you think of yourself, but maybe your expectations for the position are wrong, right? Remember, it is important to have good people in your company. I don't want to knock all of that. But at the end of the day, when you're building a large organization, you're going to tend to mediocrity once you get to a couple of thousand folk, right? So it's important to have... You got to have a business where ordinary people can be successful. And if your entire business is predicating on hiring the 5 smartest people in the planet and only then will be successful, that might be a little too hard. So I think you have to be a pragmatic buyer of talent.
Let me see if I can look at this side of the room over here. Yes, sir?
Rory, you mentioned early on that it took you a while to figure out the signals in reference checks that indicated not to touch a person with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
What are those signals?
You want to publish? You want to write a book?
I think it's the lukewarm endorsement, right, from a senior person whom you've managed to call, who probably has avoided, probably not return your call actively. You ring him at lunchtime. You do the old ring at lunchtime trick. He picks up, right, and he's going to give a short, concise answer that's not damning, because he doesn't want the liability, but he's not going to go out on a limb and say, you really should hire this guy. He's really good. I'd do another deal with him, right? So what you have to do is assume you need strong amplification on negatives. That's all. There's no word. There's no code word. It's not the Freemasons. It's just a simple set of signaling about how people behave in that circumstance.
I think you can destroy the effectiveness of a reference check, too, if you make it too clear that you've already made a decision and you're checking a box.
Yeah.
Because if you tell somebody, I'm getting ready to hire this person, I'd like your opinion, you don't want their opinion. You want to check the box.
Yes,
and the chance that somebody's going to go out on a limb and try to talk you out of it, it's just gone to zero.
Yes.
So make it very clear, I want an opinion. I don't know if this is the right person for me. I could really use your help, and you'll get some honest feedback.
That's really good.
I mean, Rory, when he first said that, was talking about nuances. And I think what you find when people are reluctantly giving a reference, that they'll be choosing their words very carefully. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to what they say, you need to kind of parse the sentence in your mind and say, are they choosing their words carefully? And I think you can actually see it. I mean, I see it, I know. And they don't have this effusive, this is a great person, go hire him, Scott?
Yeah, I just add to that. The one I always catch on the references is under the right circumstances. You hear that under any, like, would you hire them?
Yeah, under the right circumstances. Yes, if every other human being on the planet were dead and there were work to be done.
Say no more. My question's around hiring as well. I kind of have a new problem. I have a new venture. I'm closing a Series A right now. And so the kind of people that I hire are usually just crazy enough to be an entrepreneur. They really want to be part of something big, but it's in the search space. And I've always believed that building some fundamental wealth through ownership is another reason why somebody would join a crazy startup that doesn't even have a product. When I hire from places like Google, I have this issue where they're already worth $50 million, or they're already worth $60 million, and they still seem very motivated. They still are saying all of the right things, but in the back of my head, I'm saying, $50 million, you could wake up one day and say, I think I'm just going to live in Aspen for the rest of my life and ski. I don't know if you've ever had any experiences where you've had folks where they have still worked out very well, even though they had substantial wealth, or haven't.
So the question is, what are the dangers of hiring very wealthy people who may not be motivated,
right,
as much as they say they are? Yeah.
If they show up in a Bentley, that's the wrong hire. I'm just kidding. You always deal with that. I mean, there's a lot of wealth in Silicon Valley, but it's not all about money. There's a lot of people that are still, once they do the first 5, they want the 10. Once they do the 10, they want the 100. So they think you have the next Google, and they're going to succeed in a different way. They were employee number 180, here they're employee number 4, and there's a lot to be said about that. It's not about money.
In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, money isn't one of those. And there's a lot of reasons why people work other than money. That might preclude them, but it might not. I mean, you really got to get to know somebody. Why are you doing this? And ego gratification is a big tool. The ability to attend to your own goals, change the world. That's pretty big, even if you didn't make a lot of money. If somebody thought they were changing the world, that's pretty neat. To be part of it. Silicon Valley, when it was growing, was as good as making the money they made out of there. It was changing the whole business paradigm.
I mean, it's not. It is painfully clear that you're right. Money is not in the hierarchy of needs, because there's a lot of people who choose careers that aren't wealth maximizing. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a bunch of people over there in Stanford Medical Center. Nurses aren't doing it for the money. It's a necessary but not sufficient part of what gets them up in the morning. Equally, there's lots of evidence that extraordinarily greedy people running hedge funds with $1 billion get up in the morning and want to rip someone's face off for another $100, right? I think it does boil down to what you said. I think that you have to have the passion. The person has to have the passion for what you're doing. And where the crunch comes is, do they have enough passion for what you want them to do, that when they're faced with the hard early stage time choices of being with the family versus doing this and getting on the plane, they want to do it. So it's a deeper gut check on their passion more than anything else. Some will, some won't.
I'll add one thing, like a small tactical thing. Offer them the opportunity to invest in Series A. Those guys won't like it.
Looking for funding.
But at least it will, it deepens their emotional attachment to the company, because they've invested in it and they own it, which is totally different than I work for it.
That's great.
It's Sarah in Westboro.
Yeah, hi, Mark. Question for the team is, I'm also doing Series A right now, and a question about motivating.
You guys like raising money in the room here?
Is there a back door?
Question about motivating some of the VPs we bring in. So if you give them a typical point, I'm wondering what the feeling is from the panel on making some performance-based points. So if I give somebody a point, can I make a third of that sort of vested on making the first $10 million in sales?
So the question is, in terms of stock options for senior new employees, should they be time-based, or do you recommend performance-based? Fair? Okay.
I hate that for one reason. That's what vesting is for. And you don't do like a double murder on a person. If you don't trust them, don't hire them.
Absolutely.
Yep. I'd say that if you bring a person because you're not sure, and you believe if you performance manage them through option, you've made the wrong hire. It's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, the big theme of all this is about dealing with people, hiring, motivating, firing. And if you get back to, I think the consistent theme is honest and direct, right? If you're looking someone in the eye and saying, I want you to do the job, but I'm not going to pay you the going rate unless you do something else, you've gone away from the honest, direct, and simple approach. I agree with Simon, is that You pay them the going rate for the job, right? It vests over time, and if they can't do the job, you sack them, right? Whether if they get to the next level and do a different job, you bring them up. But keep it simple. Don't make your relationships contingent. It's good in marital. It's good in this kind of relationship too.
So I'm going to get to the same answer in a different way. I love the concept of performance-based options. I've never been able to get to a measurement I'm comfortable living with for a long time. If you give people a specific goal to meet, you can never predict the crazy ways they will find to achieve that objective and ruin your business in the process because they're focused on personal wealth management.
Yeah.
So I like the concept. I've never been able to get to the measurement that makes me comfortable.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Just when we price deals, someone tries to do a performance ratchet. Hey, I'll give me an extra 10% on the pre-money if I do X. They are disasters because the guy optimizes them on the outcome. And you'll hate it. Never works.
Well, there is an argument for congruence of goals. And if you can set up a performance that ties into what the investors have so that there isn't a challenge, it has some benefit. Usually what I do is kind of do some performance and then some time vesting, and they're in there so that there's some way. Totally agree with what you're saying. And you can't imagine how mysterious the moves are within a company to optimize that. And if they're as good as you think when you hire them, just realize they'll be even better at figuring out how to get that performance base.
I just to add, I have used performance-based options in the circumstance where you really got a great candidate, you really want to hire them, and you can't get a meeting of the minds, and the way you close the gap is you do a regular option, you do a little performance thing on top of it, and you kind of they claim we're going to do all these things, and you say,
but what you do is, let's be honest, because I've just done that. It's what you do is you give them the base deal for what you know is the stretch goal, and then they produce some silly goal that you know they're having a chance, and you say,
no. If they do it, then it's great.
Yeah, you're right. If they take it from 2 to 10 in 1 hour, you can have 2 points.
No. I mean, but that's the way you close the gap.
Yeah,
sometimes,
you're right.
You negotiate a deal. So I think there's a place for it. I don't think it substitutes for the value of having time-based options that are around the whole team to actually build an enterprise that has real value. Yeah. That's So yes, sir.
I've heard you speak a couple months ago about the sales process and metrics on sales. My question is, how do you hire the first sales guy, someone who won't kill your business, especially if you're supposed to work with your customers on the other coast?
Especially if
you're working with your customers in New York.
Yeah. So the question is, how do you hire your first sales guy, and how do you manage them if you can't see them? Okay. Anybody want
to talk to your customer? They're the best one to tell you. Just go out there and say, who's the best salesman you got coming in, and then get on the phone right away and go visit them and talk about what it is. Second best customer.
I think the answer, if the company is going to succeed, is you already have. By that I mean that you better be the sales guy for the company, right? And if you can't sell it, a professional sales guy probably won't be able to, right? Because you end up, if you haven't, I'm a big believer early on that if you don't know the customer buys it, when you hire the sales guy, you're running a 2-variable experiment with only one reporting variable. You got to figure out, does the product not work, or can the guy not sell? And the only data you have is he hasn't sold, and you won't know which of the two is causing it. If, on the other hand, you or one of the founding team has sold stuff to the customer and driven the transaction through, then when the sales guy comes back and says it's not sellable, you can look him in the eye and say, yes, it is. So I'm a big believer, you've already hired your first sales guy, and it's you. Sorry.
I would add to that. I have like 2 to 3 reps that I take with me wherever I go.
Yeah.
So and if I don't have that, because like they say, no, I'm not going to leave here, I'll go to the network and say, who's the guy or the gal you take with you wherever you go, and you put all your effort to get that person, because you need when you're starting a company, no one knows who you are. So, and 85% of the time, there's something wrong in your solution, you just don't want to accept it. So it's not the sales guys or sales gal's problem. So that's why you have to get the first guy or gal to tell you the truth. And not just say, it's product management didn't do this, engineers didn't ship the product, or that kind of thing. So keep a network, keep them handy, pay them well, and options don't matter for them. It's the comp plan. And make it simple, because they don't understand complicated comp plans.
And they know, and they know how to game anything.
I was going to say, I think they understand.
I would say, just kind of as a practical tip, that if you know, we teach a sales course here now, and one of the things that comes out, we actually have panels of sales executives come in and talk to our class, similar to this, and talk about questions. One of the things that comes out that's always very interesting in the class is that in sales organizations, every manager talks to every report every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every manager talks to every report every day. There's a sense of immediacy, and information is the lifeblood of the organization. So if you have somebody working for you in New York, call them up 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. What happened at the call? You know, when are you going in to see this guy? Mm-hmm. You know, we're working on this deal. What happened with them? You'll know whether he's working. I mean, they're pretty good at faking it. You know, they're pretty smooth guys. You know, but you'll know if he's faking it after a little bit of time. So, yes, sir.
You guys didn't talk too much about any legal issues with firing. Specifically, we had a situation where it turned out the misfit, quote unquote, had psychological problems and was seeing a therapist, and so we were very worried about the legal ramifications of that. So, have you dealt with that, or what's been best?
So the question is, what are the legal issues relative to firing people, and how do you deal with them?
There's a process you go through. You have to do performance evaluation. You have to give them reasonably unreasonable objectives that they can hit. But at the end, there's a lot of ambulance chasers that throw anything at you, from retaliation to discrimination to over 40, under 80. You know, they'll try everything, and sometimes you end up settling. But a lot of time you take the high ground. Said, I'm going to set an example, but there's a huge liability to the company, and especially in wasting management time when they're deposed. You have to do an inquiry every time somebody throws something at you and make sure it's really not happening.
I think that's true, but at the same time, and Mark and I have confronted this in deals, is do the right thing for the company, and if you're going to get sued, so be it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's never for $1 billion. It's always for a year's salary or 2 years' salary, right? If the right thing for the company is not to have a person in the organization, then your job is to get that person out. You should take legal advice to do it in the best possible way. Entirely separate from the legal advice, you should decide from a culture perspective how humane or not humane you want to be and how much slack you want to cut them. And that's a cultural decision. They're separate. But at the end of the day, it's more important to manage around the culture, by the way, than to manage around the legal liability. Yeah. I remember just recently I had to terminate a CEO, and the lawyer was withering on about we're exposing ourselves to $200,000 worth of liability here because he can sue it. I said, my friend, we're exposing ourselves to somewhere between $50 and $150 million of bad outcome. Right? If I could guarantee certainty on this decision for $500,000, I'd write the check right now. Mm-hmm. Legal liability, even though it's is not what should drive the decision.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that when you fire someone, it's as important for the people behind as it is for the people who are leaving, and it goes here too. It's part of the thing you want to do is treat people humanely, and if you want to go, if you're going to do severance packages, you want to do severance packages, whatever those things are. But once you get to the beyond fairness, I always had a policy that, after we make our offer and you don't take it, see you in court. Mm-hmm. And, we had 5,500 employees, and we had almost no litigation because people knew that we would not settle.
If someone had a medical condition, this person would arrive at work and stay in their car and have a breakdown, and because being close to the building actually caused her anxiety, and then she would just go home, and we'd be waiting. And our business is a service, no tech. It's working with actually high school students and their families. So the parents would be waiting for the meeting or the kid, and then we suffered with a lot of people not renewing because of this. So from a parent's perspective, you're pissed off because the kid didn't get the service. You don't sympathize with that. From our perspective, kind of, but we're in the middle. So you're saying severance packages would be something you would offer someone with that medical condition?
I wouldn't. Yeah, it's very detailed. I don't really have a sense. I wouldn't offer opinion. I wouldn't.
But the opinion
like
I can
very
give
sticky problem
is you got to make that decision. And so it's just how you execute it.
So we were in the process of doing all the 360 and doing the performance evaluation. She quit during her performance evaluation. She actually gave herself a lower evaluation than I had. So it took care of itself in a way, but I'm just thinking.
But again, it
Sounds
points
like
to
you dodged a bullet over there.
One thing that wasn't touched on, and most of you are probably aware of it, but as you move around the globe, as most of these companies do, the rules and the regulations are quite different, and you should make sure you're aware of them and not just go in and say, okay, this is the way we do it, whether it's in the EU or Asia or whatever.
Yes?
You talked at one point about the qualitative things about reference checks. The Silicon Valley is surprisingly insular with regard to this chemistry issue. And I'm coming back after 12 years in Europe, and I'm noticing that there are a lot of sort of signs and unsaid things about the word chemistry. I'd like to hear some of the people talk about sort of signals that you get that this person doesn't fit in with the right chemistry. Usually I'm bringing over companies from different places in Europe and in Israel.
So the question is, how do you, what is the chemistry that you look for in people, and how do you tell if it's there? Is that the question, or?
Right, and the thing is, what are the signs that
it may not be there? What are the signs that
chemistry isn't there?
What are the signs that the chemistry may not be right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's tough.
Yeah, it is tough.
Can you think of specific instances where you said, wow, this person doesn't have the right?
It's like the Supreme Court justice talking about pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
So has anyone read Blink by Malcolm Gladwell?
Yeah.
So, his theory is almost instantaneously, and you don't know why but you're probably right. You can't teach that in a business school course. I'm not sure I'd give that 100% weight. But I will say when I talk to people about motivation, about environments in which they find themselves successful, when I check references, I feel like I get a real good picture of how someone works and whether I think it's a fit, knowing my organization, in a way that I can't give you a checklist and say, check for 8 of these 12 things.
But when they say they've got 45 days of holiday in Europe and coming over here, are you going to give them the same? You get a clue?
No.
Yeah.
Well, in your comment about the first question being what's the option package,
Yeah.
that's telling me something about motivation and fit.
I think what you're wrestling with in part is chemistry is a very handy word, because chemistry can be a nice way and an utterly non-value specific way of saying anything from we don't like each other to I think you're stupid to you don't know this but one of your on-list references dissed you. So chemistry, the problem with chemistry as a word is it's used a lot because it's a safe word to use, right? So actually distilling when chemistry really matters is hard because it's overused. It's the first comment. And then the second comment is I kind of rebel against the chemistry decision to some extent because more and more I think it's just about a practical series of getting a job done. And I'm erring more and more on the person. Chemistry, because it's too vague, can sometimes be not useful. I don't care what they do in their free time. I don't care if they're a raving Republican or a raving Democrat. I just want to know, are they passionate around the job at hand? So if chemistry is a word for, do they share how I want to the vision I want to pursue and how I want to pursue it in terms of my values at work, then I think it's a useful word. If it gets any more vague than that, I actually think it's kind of soggy thinking,
Do you think that you've noticed that a lot of people use that word?
Yeah, for exactly the reason I said is that we had a very interesting discussion with the CEO actually about this. Is when do you give honest feedback and when do you not? Let me give you a very hard statement. If you think the person is just too stupid for the job, it's not actionable. You can give them the feedback, but they can do nothing with it. This actually came up in the context of also girlfriend dumping, right? It's the same problem, right? There's no value in saying that, right? It's it's in your head. There's a big bubble there that says you just are too dumb for this job. Why diss the guy? Why say that, give that information? You'll say, oh, it's just chemistry. And you'll move on, he'll move on, and that's why the word gets overused.
Yes.
I have a question about hiring for startup companies. You're looking for the functional expertise. You're looking for the cultural fit. How important do you guys think it is to have prior startup experience versus coming from a big company?
So the question is, in hiring for startups, how important is it to have prior startup experience?
I'd say it's very important because your role in a big company is totally different than a startup. And we've had a lot of situations in which we brought killers from larger companies. They showed up, and within a month, they killed themselves and the company. So I'd say prior startup experience is extremely important. As in, I need a jet.
So I just did a startup where we had no people with startup experience, and 3 years in, we're doing great. So I'm not sure I can say you need startup experience across the board. I think the question is looking at the function I need done and thinking about what resources the person's going to have available to do that, and asking myself whether I'm comfortable they can do that in that environment. And so it's not that I require they've had startup experience, but if the only way they've ever been successful is they're surrounded by unlimited resources, then I'm nervous.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, for me, it wasn't startup experience, but it was an experience in an environment where resources were scarce.
We used to, in the old days, we used to say it's great to hire for someone from IBM as long as they've been someplace else first.
And I think your comment is spot on, because we do a fair amount of biotech investing, and one thing I've observed there is it's not nearly as important to have startup experience, because the task at hand is science. The molecules don't know where you worked last time, right? Which is very different than if, and therefore the task at hand is exactly the same if you're at Genentech or your little startup. Conversely, selling software is a night and day difference if you have IBM account control or if you have 4 referenceable customers. So it very much depends situationally on what you're trying to achieve.
Hey, Mark, can I ask one quick thing?
Sure.
Go. Persistence
I
pays.
found a very easy check on that, particularly for big companies, is as part of your interview process, join them in doing something they wouldn't normally do. So we would say, we hired a VP of sales and said, well, why don't you join, the only time I have is if you join me, go rack 10 boxes down in our data center, because that's our business. That's what we do. And then observe how they do it. If they're like, this is somebody else's work, this isn't what I do. I mean, you can start to see it culturally, it may not fit. But if they actually roll up their sleeves, rack those boxes, then it's much.
Okay. So once here, you guys might have dealt with this situation where you finally find the right person for the key hire position you're looking for, and this person has a lot of potential, but they want a salary or a compensation package which would be more in line with someone who has a strong track record rather than a lot of potential. And so do you then go ahead and give
like an MBA?
So you have 2 options. Because one, do you give that salary and kind of pay more than what you think the person is worth and have a number of precedents set within the company? Or do you try to negotiate them down and end up with an employee who might not be as thrilled with the salary that they're getting? Or do you just say, well, I'm going to have to give up on this key hire altogether because we're just too far apart, and I'll spend another month or 2 looking?
I'd take the third choice.
So the question is, can you give me that question again?
The key hire wants basically the salary of a lot.
Okay, so you have a relatively non-specific person who wants a salary of a person who's very experienced and specific. So big salary gap, really talented person, but hasn't really done the job before. Right. Okay.
I just think you got the wrong person.
Yeah.
And I don't think you will ever do it. If you negotiate them down to that, they'll always hold it against you, and they'll be hunting for another job while they're there. And the gap's just too big. And so there's enough people out there. There probably isn't just one person who fits that profile of skills that are there, and you'll find others who have that same set of skills, who understand the position you're in, what you need to do, are resonant with that.
The gap is not the issue. The gap is a proxy for something else. The reality is the difference between a second-time VP of engineering in terms of salary and a first-time VP of engineering isn't actually that large in terms of salary. The real truth you're wrestling with is can they do the job or not, right? And if they can, you should pay them the going rate, and if they can't, they're not. It's just like in our business. People talk a lot about valuation. Valuation is, I always say, valuation is a proxy for lack of conviction. If you want the person to do the job and they're asking for broadly the industry salary and you think they can do the job, then pay them it, right? If you don't think they can do the job, then any amount of money, saving half the salary and hiring a crap engineer, VP of engineering is not saving money, right? So the real question is, do you think they can do the job? Now, if they have some vision that, VPs of engineering get 4 times the median, then they're just crazy and you should move on. But the market is pretty efficient.
Take the last question.
Yeah, one question again on recruiting. I'm just wondering what kind of, if like VCs recruit for their portfolio companies, the candidates they're looking for. I mean, do these candidates also look for blue chip companies where they would start working? Because I just think these are two different worlds, and then how can you convince these people to join like startup portfolio company instead of going to a blue chip or other top companies? So, what is then your selling proposition, or do you only get people who would just go to a startup but they don't look in options for corporate? You know what I mean?
So the question is, and you're competing with a blue chip company, how do you successfully motivate that person to join your very, very small,
doesn't happen often.
Very small, very vulnerable,
Sure.
fragile startup?
So, blue chip company is a broad term. A lot of people that work in those companies find, and I'm going to be pejorative here, but find the monotony comforting, find the security and lack of change comforting, find the protection, and I never had to make a decision myself. It got reviewed by 18 committees after me. How can I possibly be on the hook? A great environment. And I said it in the pejorative way, but seriously, that's a good fit for many people. There are other people that feel dead in that environment. And so when you offer them a chance to be part of something exciting, be more involved, make decisions, make things happen, it's often that's not generally my biggest competition to get people is that job in the big company, because if they're really interested in that, I don't know why they're talking to me. That's a waste of everyone's time.
I agree 100%. I mean, I worked for a large company for 6 months. Now I know why they don't have windows in corporate America, because I would have thrown myself out. I'm a startup kind of guy, and you find people like me.
I would just add that it is the job of the CEO and, of course, everybody that joins them thereafter to actually evangelize this as something. I mean, they generally believe it's exciting and they have a vision and a mission, and you get people excited, and then people self-select. And if they don't want to self-select, then adios. Okay, so I think we're just about finished with our time. I'd like to thank very much the panelists for joining us today.